Members of law enforcement are constantly under pressure to close the cases that are assigned to them. But in many cases, there isn't enough evidence to identify a suspect, and the case goes cold. But sometimes evidence is found later on, thanks to witnesses that come forward, or advances in crime-fighting technology, and the perpetrator is finally identified and made to pay for their misdeeds. Number 10. 30-year-old Ashley Elkins disappeared on the 2nd of January 2025, and it was immediately suspected that foul play was involved. She remains missing, but a suspect has been taken into custody, while his involvement in her disappearance is being investigated. Ashley is a mother of 2 children who works as a hairstylist in Warren, Michigan. She's in the habit of keeping in close touch with her family, but they've not heard from her since the day that she vanished and are increasingly concerned for her well-being. On the 2nd of January, Ashley left her house from where she runs her hairstylist business at around 8:30 a.m., telling her family that she was going out to run some errands. She then got into her gray Chevrolet Malibu, which had no license plates, and drove away. This was the last time that they saw her. When she failed to return home later that day, her family started to worry, and the next day they filed a missing person report with the Warren Police Department. When her cell phone was tracked, it was found to have been at her boyfriend DeAndre Booker's house, which is located in Roseville, Michigan. Investigators traveled to the apartment but found that no one was home, and they failed to locate either Ashley or her car. Ashley's family told the police that she'd spoken to DeAndre on the phone a few days before she disappeared, after he called her and pretended to be a customer who wanted to make a hair appointment. For reasons unknown, this caused her to panic, and she ran out of the house but returned a short while later. When DeAndre arrived at her house, she hid and told her sisters to do the same. He knocked on the house's side door but left when no one answered. Investigators have analyzed video from surrounding CCTV cameras in hopes of tracking Ashley's last movements, but they've unfortunately been unsuccessful so far. They released an update on the 7th of January, stating that Ashley's car was found abandoned in Roseville, a short distance from DeAndre's house. This prompted investigators to search his house, and in the process they removed a dumpster from the property and booked it in as evidence, though it's not been revealed as of yet what they found inside. The following day, DeAndre was taken into custody, and it was then revealed that the search of his house led investigators to believe that he was likely involved in her disappearance, and that there was some kind of foul play involved, though they've declined to reveal what it was that they found since the investigation is still ongoing. They've appealed to the public for anyone who knows where Ashley may be to come forward. She's described as having black hair and brown eyes, standing 5'3" tall and weighing 160 pounds. Anyone who knows where Ashley is, or who has any additional information that could aid the investigation, is asked to contact the Warren Police Department at 586-574-4784. Number 9. A murder case that took place in Florida in November of 1979 has finally seen a breakthrough in January of 2025. And the suspect that's been named has taken everybody by surprise, since he's a former sheriff's deputy and a trusted member of law enforcement for many years. On the 5th of November of that year, John Greer was on duty when he radioed the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, which is located in Florida, at about 2 a.m. to report that he was on patrol near the farm store in Ridge Harbor and that he'd come across a disturbing sight. He relayed information about the scene, stating that the store's 25-year-old assistant manager, Marie Easterly, had been attacked with a firearm, and she was unfortunately no longer alive. He also mentioned that her assailant had made his getaway with $7.34 in cash, which he stole from the store before using a firearm to end Marie's life. An investigation was immediately launched, but it was tough going right from the start. Marie's friends and family were all questioned in case they knew of someone who wanted to harm Marie, but they all gave the same answer, that she was well-liked and didn't have any enemies. It seemed as though someone merely entered the store after deciding to rob it, and at some point decided to end Marie's life since she likely saw their face or knew them by name. She was fired on and hit twice, once in the back and once in the head. These interviews resulted in no leads being found, and investigators were unable to identify a suspect. But some of Greer's fellow deputies started to suspect that there was more to this story than he was letting on, but they were also unable to find any evidence that would implicate him. The case quickly went cold, and it seemed as though Marie's attacker had gotten away with their crime. Greer's fellow deputies did, however, recall that he had contacted the office on the 27th of August that year to report that his wife had passed away at their house in Port Charlotte. On that occasion, investigators also found some of the evidence at the house didn't add up with Greer's story, but they were unable to find anything conclusive, and her case also went cold very quickly. On the 30th of September, 1980, one of Greer's female friends was found deceased, and he resigned from his position as deputy just 4 days later on the 3rd of October. In that case, it was found that his friend had taken too many illegal substances, resulting in her passing away. But her husband reported that Greer had grown infatuated with her, and that he'd made unwanted advances towards her on several occasions. This was never proven, but his statements were taken into evidence. Following his resignation, Greer worked at another police station and also worked in aviation, since he had a pilot license. None of these cases saw any more progress until 2016, when a cold case squad announced that they'd identified a suspect in Marie's case, and that they used to work in law enforcement. It was then that a former sheriff's explorer came forward to report that Greer had assaulted her in the past, and at one point mentioned to her that he wanted to end Marie's life. She also noticed that he had biological material on his hands on the night of Marie's murder. In 2023, Greer was arrested in Kingsport, Tennessee, and he then admitted to ending the lives of Marie and his wife all those years ago. Greer passed away in March of 2024, never having served any time for his crimes, and in January of 2025, these two cases were officially closed. Number 8. In 1997, 25-year-old Megan Rose was working as a disability and aged care nursing assistant in Budina, Queensland, Australia. Her younger sister, Fiona, described her as someone who was always there for others when they needed help, which is evidenced by her chosen profession. But Megan's life was cut short on the 18th of July, 1997, and her body was found at the bottom of Point Cartwright Cliffs, which are situated in Mooloolaba, early that morning, and at first, no one was suspected. Since Megan had a lot of alcohol in her system when she was found, it was assumed that she'd ingested more alcohol than she could handle, and that this led to her losing her life at the cliffs. But it would later be discovered that this was not the case. At the time, no further investigations were undertaken, and no suspects were being sought. But the case was never closed, and in 2022, investigators decided to take another look at the odd circumstances surrounding Megan's death. They learned that she'd been living in Victoria until a year before her passing, when she relocated to Queensland with her son and an older man named Keith Lees, with whom she was in a relationship at the time. Investigators have not revealed what further evidence was found, but in 2023, they announced that a $500,000 reward was being offered to anyone who came forward with information leading to the arrest of Megan's attacker. It was now certain that her passing was no accident, but no suspects were named at the time. It was known, though, that Lees had received around $200,000 from an insurance policy that had been taken out on Megan's life the year before her life was ended, and detectives attempted to talk to him, but he decided to flee to Victoria. It was assumed that he was living in the Northern Territory and then relocated to Sydney in order to avoid being captured, and there he started using a fake name to avoid suspicion. He reached out to several different groups, including religious organizations, for assistance, and not knowing who he really was or that he was suspected of being involved in Megan's passing, they were happy to help. That is, until a few people recognized him from news reports, and they contacted the police to inform them of his whereabouts. Lee's car was found abandoned in Portland, Victoria in June of 2023, and a search was conducted in the area, but Lees could not be located. Then in 2025, a member of the public recognized Lees, and he was tracked down and arrested in Sydney. It was then found that he faced several other charges, including one in which he assaulted a police officer. Lees's case is set to be heard in court on the 24th of January, 2025, just a few miles from the site where Megan was found at the bottom of the cliffs. Queensland police have asked anyone with additional information to come forward so that the case against Lees can be further strengthened. Number 7. Some cases take decades to solve, and it's only thanks to determination of investigators that a suspect is finally identified and arrested, which is evidenced in the case of David Weaver, who was finally tracked down in January of 2025. Details around the circumstances of this case are few and far between, but it's known that a man by the name of Tommy Dean Jr. was found deceased at his house, which was located in the 800 block of Clark Lane in Toone, Tennessee, on the 27th of August 2010. Dean had been attacked with a firearm, but at the time there was not enough evidence to identify a suspect, and when no further leads were received, the case went cold, and it seemed as though his murder could go unsolved. This prompted Mike Dunavant, the Judicial District Attorney General, to combine the expertise of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation and the Hardeman County Sheriff's Department, and together they started investigating the case and looking for any evidence that may have gone unnoticed. Details surrounding the investigation have not been made public, but it's been revealed that on the 6th of January, 2025, a grand jury in Hardeman found probable cause for a man named David Clinton Weaver to be arrested, since he was thought to be responsible for the attack that claimed Dean's life. An arrest warrant was issued, and Weaver was charged with first-degree murder. It took just 2 days for the authorities to track him down, and on the 8th of February, he was taken into custody by the U.S. Marshal Service, 14 years after he had allegedly committed the crime. He was taken into the Hardeman County Jail, where he was booked in, and after an initial hearing, his bond was set at $250,000. While Weaver is the only suspect in the case, investigators have reiterated that he will be considered innocent until proven guilty, which will be determined at Weaver's trial later on in 2025. Number 6. Christmas Day is supposed to be a day of celebration and giving, when families get together and spend the day in each other's company. But in 2020, Ethan Mathis' family had the worst Christmas of their lives when they were informed that he was no longer alive. At around 8 a.m. that day, the Garland County Communications Center received a phone call from a member of the public who reported finding someone unresponsive in a driveway and that they were possibly deceased. Investigators were dispatched to the scene, which was at the 1400 block of Bald Mountain Road in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and upon their arrival, they confirmed that 18-year-old Ethan Mathis was indeed no longer alive. When the scene was investigated, it was determined that he'd been attacked with a firearm and that he'd been wounded several times, causing Ethan to lose his life. The news was relayed to Ethan's family, who described him as a good person who'd never been in trouble with the law. Despite a thorough investigation, no suspects could be identified, and Ethan's family started to worry that his attacker may get away with their crimes unless additional evidence was found or witnesses came forward with more information. Ethan's aunt, Misty Ellie, told a media outlet that his family was baffled by the crime since they had no idea what he was doing in that area. As far as they knew, he had no plans to travel there that day, and to their knowledge, he didn't know anyone in the area. This led them to believe that he was attacked elsewhere, and after losing his life, his assailant transported him to Bald Mountain Road, where he was left to be discovered by a passerby. She also revealed that Ethan had been living in Florida with his father, but then decided to return to his hometown of Hot Springs in 2019 so that he could be close to his girlfriend. He moved in with his grandparents, who were living in the Home Harbor apartment complex on Malvern Avenue. Here, he landed a job in construction, and in the meantime was studying towards the completion of his GED. She added that he was a trusting person, and in some instances he was almost too gullible, making him an easy target for anyone who wanted to take advantage of him, or who may have wanted to harm him. His family speculated that he had gotten involved with the wrong types of people, and that this eventually led to his murder. Misty last spoke to her nephew on the 24th of December, the day before he was found, and told her that he was getting ready to move back to Florida. That night, he visited a friend at his house and left at around 11 p.m. Unfortunately, he didn't tell anyone of his plans after that, and it wasn't known how he ended up in the area where he was eventually discovered. When no further leads were received, the case went cold, and a reward of $50,000 was offered to anyone who could shed more light on what happened that day. Misty started distributing flyers with information on Ethan's case in hopes that someone would remember something from that morning and come forward, but this never happened. But in January of 2025, it was announced that a suspect had finally been identified, though the details that led to the arrest have not been made public. But it is known that the suspect is a 19-year-old man named Zarell Quincy James Tilson, who's been incarcerated since 2021. It was revealed that Tilson had a lengthy history with the law, and in one of his cases, he was charged with a slew of crimes, including aggravated robbery, possession of an illegal firearm, possession of illegal substances, theft by receiving a firearm, theft of property, and fleeing. Tilson is currently awaiting trial for ending Ethan's life, and considering the number of charges against him, it's likely that he will spend the rest of his life in prison. Number 5. On New Year's Day of 2025, police officers in State Line, Mississippi were called out to the Clark's gas station on St. Peter's Street after a member of the public reported that someone had robbed the business while brandishing a firearm, and that several people's lives had been ended. When they arrived at the scene, investigators found 3 people, Rhonda Denson, Lester Campbell, and Jason Thornton, deceased, and that their attacker had escaped with a small amount of cash. They then learned that Rhonda was an employee at the gas station and that she worked there for several years. Lester was a close friend of hers, and he would often wait for her to finish her shift to make sure she was safe when leaving for home. Jason was seemingly in the wrong place at the wrong time, since he merely stopped in at the station to get some gas, but the robber had, for reasons unknown, decided to end his life as well. After CCTV security cameras from the gas station were checked, the attacker was described as an African-American man who stands about 5 foot 10 inches tall and weighs about 250 pounds. The footage also revealed some chilling details about the attack. Brad Warwick, the Greene County Chief Deputy, revealed to the media that the man had been waiting behind the gas station until Rhonda arrived to open the store. As soon as she and Lester entered the building, he ran around the side where he encountered Jason, and without a second thought, produced a firearm and discharged it, ending his life. He then proceeded into the shop where he told Rhonda to give him the cash from her register. She did as he asked, but as soon as he had the money in his hands, the man fired at both her and Lester, also ending their lives. It's believed that he did so that no witnesses would be left behind, but investigators saw this as a senseless act since he was wearing a mask over his face and surely would have been aware of the fact that the store was being monitored by CCTV security cameras. The attacker then looked for a way to make his escape and decided to steal Rhonda's car, but he abandoned it after driving just a few miles from the scene. A search was immediately conducted between Mississippi and Alabama, with the main focus being on the state line. The man's image was released to the public, and it was announced that a reward of $100,000 was being offered for information leading to his arrest. It isn't known what led investigators to him, but on the 9th of January, 2025, a man named Drexler Johnson was tracked down and arrested for the attack. It was then discovered that Johnson was a star quarterback for Waynesboro High School, who later played for Jones College and had a history with the law since he'd been arrested in the past for stealing more than 20 weapons from a drugstore in Waynesboro. He was also arrested for ending the life of 52-year-old Harris Walker Jr. in Wayne County in 2024, and it became clear that he was a career criminal with little regard for human life. The case was eventually dropped due to a lack of evidence, but Johnson will be put on trial for the gas station attack and will likely learn his fate sometime in 2025. Number 4. When someone goes missing out in the wild, time is of the essence, since every passing hour could cause the missing person to wander further away from searchers and from their rescue. It's not common for someone to be missing in the woods for more than a week and to then be found alive. But that's exactly what happened in the case of a hiker who disappeared in the Kosciuszko National Park in New South Wales, Australia. On the 26th of December, 2024, 23-year-old medical student Hadi Nazari was among a group of hikers who were hiking in the park when he decided to take a few photos, and he became separated from the rest of the group. He was last seen at about 2:30 p.m. when he failed to return to the campground by 8:45 p.m. as planned. The rest of the group realized that he may have gotten lost, and they contacted the Riverina police. The following morning, a command post was established, and a search was underway with the aid of the National Parks and Wildlife Service, New South Wales Ambulance, police aerial support, and specialist search crews. For 3 days, they scoured the woods where Hadi went missing, but it wasn't until the 31st of December that they finally found a clue. A pair of hiking poles and some trash, thought to have been left behind by the missing man, were discovered near the Kosciuszko River, and searchers finally had an idea of where to look for him. By the 2nd of January, hopes that Hadi would be found alive were quickly dwindling. but searchers continued their task and focused their efforts on creeks and other bodies of water in the area. On the 4th of January, extra help was brought in the form of additional specialist searchers, and the following day they came across Hadi's campsite. Here they found his lighter and camera, which was still inside the camera bag. By the 8th of January, Hadi had been missing for a total of 13 days, and it seemed unlikely that his tale would have a happy ending. But then, the unthinkable happened. At around 3:15 p.m., hikers in the Blue Lake area heard someone calling out to them, and they decided to investigate. They found that Hadi was the one who was trying to get their attention, and he explained that he'd been out there for nearly 2 weeks and that he was very thirsty. The hikers immediately contacted emergency services, and he was picked up by a helicopter and transported to the search command post, where he was reunited with his family, who was also part of the search effort. He was in surprisingly good shape, and when assessed at a hospital, he was found to have suffered no long-lasting effects from his time out in the wild. He explained that he managed to survive by drinking water from creeks, picking berries to eat, and as luck would have it, he stumbled across a cabin in the area in which another hiker had left 2 food bars, which he then took with him. Hadi has refused to speak to the media about the time that he was lost, stating that he would wait for one media outlet or another to offer him at least $100,000 to tell his story. He's also hoping to land a book deal, but in the meantime, his family has stated that they're beyond relieved that he's safe, and they've thanked the hundreds of people involved in finding Hadi and bringing him back to safety. Number 3. It's surprising how often criminals are released from jail, only to commit further crimes days later, and then be taken into custody once more. Unfortunately, this is what happened in the case of the murder of Kayleen Rodell, which took place in 2016. Christopher Rowe and Kayleen had been in a relationship for some time and had one child together. At the time, they were living in Blairsville, Pennsylvania, but the relationship was far from ideal, as it soon came to light that Rowe had an abusive nature and that he'd assaulted Kayleen. The incident was reported to the police, and Rowe was taken into custody. He was booked into the Cambria County Jail, but while there, he clearly resented the fact that she reported him to the police, and he started hatching a nefarious plan. He told several of his fellow inmates that he planned to get out of jail soon, and when he did so, he intended to end Kayleen's life. He didn't have to wait long, as he was released soon after and made good on his promise. Just days after his release, Kayleen suddenly disappeared, and an investigation was launched. It was then reported by some of her colleagues that Rowe had shown up at her place of work and threatened her before she vanished. On the 7th of August 2016, Kayleen was found deceased on a hiking trail in Johnstown, and when CCTV security cameras in that area were checked, investigators saw her being driven near the trail. Rowe was identified as the driver, but it was only when a witness came forward with further information that his fate was truly sealed. They told investigators that Rowe had admitted to them that he'd ended Kayleen's life via strangulation, and that he then drove her body to Johnstown, where he left her on the hiking trail to be discovered later. He also told this witness that if they contacted the authorities or told anyone what he had done, he would come for them next. Rowe was taken into custody, and at his trial, it was revealed that Kayleen's cell phone records showed that he was in the Blairsville, Evansburg, and Johnstown areas on the day that she vanished. The phone then traveled back to the couple's house, where it was switched off and never switched on again. As for Rowe's phone, it was switched off for a long period, likely while he was in the process of driving to the trail and back home again. Rowe had accused another woman of being the one who'd ended Kayleen's life, but when her phone records were checked, it was found that she was nowhere near any of the areas of interest at the time, and hence could not have been the one who ended her life. At Rowe's trial, it was alleged that he and the women were living together at the time, and that he'd driven her to the site where Kayleen was found. While there, he threatened her, stating that he would end her life if she went to the police. A forensic expert testified that Kayleen's life had been ended 1 or 2 days before she was found. Rowe has always been adamant that he was not responsible for ending Kayleen's life, but he was found guilty, and on the 9th of January, 2025, he was found guilty and sentenced to spend the rest of his life behind bars without the possibility of parole. Number 2. Investigators are growing increasingly concerned for the welfare of Eliza and Henrietta Husty, 2 sisters who mysteriously disappeared in Aberdeen, Scotland on the 7th of January, 2025. Eliza and Henrietta are part of a set of 32-year-old triplets that hail from Hungary, and their sister Edith was one of the last people to speak to them before they disappeared. She told investigators that she last heard from the pair on New Year's Eve while they were on a video call, and that they both seemed happy at the time, but added that she found it strange to see them walking the streets there so late. She also revealed that Eliza and Henrietta decided to leave Hungary 7 years ago and move to Scotland. Their brother Joseph also told investigators that their mother last spoke to them on the 4th of January, and that they had a 40-minute conversation over the phone, during which nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The family describes the two sisters as being very close, and that they usually do everything together. They preferred to stay at home rather than go out at night, since they enjoyed cooking and watching movies together. During the investigation into their disappearance, Eliza and Henrietta were captured on CCTV footage walking on Market Street near River Dee. The area is being thoroughly searched since it contains several commercial and industrial units. The river is also being searched in case they somehow ended up in the water, but so far no sign of the sisters has been found. Investigators released an update on the 11th of January and included the CCTV images of the pair walking in the area where they were last seen. They've since asked members of the public to be on the lookout, and if they're spotted, to inform the authorities immediately so that they can hopefully be confirmed as safe to their family. They've also asked businesses in the South Esplanade and Menzies Road areas to review footage from their security cameras in case Eliza and Henrietta passed by that way. But so far, no further information has been received, and the search effort is still ongoing. It's known that the sisters walked over Victoria Bridge and then turned onto a footpath next to the River Dee, which is currently experiencing icy conditions. They're thought to have been headed towards the Aberdeen Boat Club, but it isn't known whether this was their intended destination, since no further footage of the pair has been found so far. Police dogs and members of the Marine Unit are assisting with the search along with helicopters that have been searching from the air. Police divers have been searching from the river, but have not found any additional clues. Investigators have released an update saying that they would continue to speak to anyone who knew Eliza and Henrietta in hopes that they could provide them with more information on their last known movements or any plans they had that night. They're both described as being of a slim build, with long brown hair, and motorists who were driving in the area at the time when they were last seen have been asked to check their dashcam footage in case they captured something fitting this description. Anyone who has information on Eliza and Henrietta's case is asked to contact the 101 emergency number, quoting case incident number 0735 of Tuesday, the 7th of January, 2025. Number 1. In January of 2022, 30-year-old Ryan Staggs was the owner of the Happy Motors dealership in Newport, Oregon. On the 8th of August the previous year, he was targeted at his house when an unknown person entered his bedroom and attacked him with a firearm while he was asleep. He was badly injured but miraculously survived the attack. But he was unable to identify his attacker, since the attack was to his face and he was unable to see who it was that entered his home. Then, on the 31st of January, 2022, Ryan suddenly went missing. And while some people have speculated that his disappearance may be linked to the prior attack, no evidence has been found to prove this theory. Investigators have not released many details on the case since the investigation is still ongoing, but new details have been made public, in which it's alleged that his life was ended by a 60-year-old man named Jack David Baird. After Ryan was reported missing, investigators appealed to the public for any information that could lead to him being found, and that's when the case took a very sinister turn. Witnesses came forward on the 24th of December, 2024, to report that they'd seen Baird at Ryan's house the day after he went missing. Neighbors also reported hearing Ryan screaming inside his house at 175 55th Street on the 29th of January, 2022. In the days following Ryan's disappearance, Baird was seen on several occasions at his house, which is located on Northwest 7th Street, where he then started digging in the backyard with a backhoe. One of Ryan's neighbors contacted the police to report that he'd gone into the backyard to clean up after his dog, and while there, he found something that he thought was very suspicious. He came across a muddy area in the yard where it looked as though someone had been digging and then covered the area up again shortly after. Investigators managed to find the business that the backhoe belonged to and discovered that Baird had rented it just 2 days after Ryan went missing. He told one of his friends that a pipe in his backyard had started leaking, and that he needed the backhoe to expose it so that it could be fixed. Baird's background was checked, and it was found that he'd been in trouble with the law before, since he was arrested for felony robberies. Strangely, Ryan's car was also found to be missing, but it was later found to have been sold at an auction, and by the time investigators were able to search it, any evidence that may have been present was no longer there. On the 24th of December, 2024, a witness came forward to report that they'd spoken to Baird and that he'd confessed to ending Ryan's life before renting the backhoe and burying his remains in his yard. Thanks to this new information, a search warrant was granted for Baird's house, and he was arrested on the 27th of December, 2024. He was charged with ending Ryan's life and another charge related to the disposal of his remains. It's not been revealed whether any additional evidence was found during the search, but investigators stated that the missing person investigation is still ongoing. His bail has been set at $500,000, but currently he remains incarcerated. An update from the investigators revealed that his first hearing was held on the 7th of January, 2025, but they've also asked that anyone who has further information on Ryan's disappearance to come forward by contacting the Newport Police Tip Line at 541-270-1856. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.